Good afternoon. We are here to conduct a study session and receive an update from Salina Animal Services. I will let City Manager Mike Scraggs start us off.
Thank you, Mayor. There's quite a bit of information here, just really kind of responding to various aspects of animal services, questions that have arisen, providing you with a status update. Jeff Hammond and his staff have done quite a bit of work to pull this together, and I know there's quite a bit here, so we may run out of time before it's all over. So I'll turn it over to Jeff Hammond, Director of the Parks Department.
Mr. Hammond.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Jeff Hammond, Director of Parks and Recreation. So we get into some, I have several slides here, as you can see. I do have stopping points along the way to ask questions throughout the presentation. So the first slide is a census of animals at the animal shelter as of August 20th. I do have updated information relating to today's census as it compares to August 20th, but the overall story is that the animal shelter is full, the negative numbers that you might see on this slide means that there might be more than one dog in one kennel, like they were housemates or they were puppies together. So that's why you see a negative number as compared to the number of kennels available versus the inventory or the census of dogs. Updated numbers as compared to the numbers you see on the second slide there, not a whole lot of changes have occurred. We do have some we did transfer out 4 pit bulls, or we traded 4 pit bulls with Newton, Kansas. We also have we had a pregnant pit bull that had babies, so we have their babies at the shelter, and that's caused an increase in the number of pit bulls in Courthole because that dog came in pregnant and gave birth at the shelter. We have picked up some additional fosters of cats. We have more cats in foster than we did previously. We have 12 now. But the overall story is that we're very full, and we're slightly fuller than we were on August 20th. And then with the number of pit bulls we do have, I wanted to make sure I did report out that staff is aware that there is a petition being currently underway for the elimination of breed-specific language, and staff had taken steps to start to prepare a staff report relating to that, for that possibility that could be coming forth soon, that petition.
And don't want to bog down in that, but commissioners, you may be aware that there's a timeline involved. If the petition is submitted and the signatures are verified, then you have a decision point in there. So as staff, we recognize we are going to owe you a pretty detailed staff report in a short amount of time. So we've gone ahead and started just outlining the information that we need to be prepared to walk you through if the petition is ultimately submitted and certified.
Next slide is relating to the donation funds, which was the animal shelter does have a donation fund, or it's a city's donation fund for the animal shelter. It's a special revenue fund. It's accounted for separately by staff and then also by our finance department. The fund balance at the end of 2023 was $595,000. There has been some confusion recently about funds relating to the Friends of the Animal Shelter and the Animal Shelter funds, but I want to make sure that the funds that the city has are separate and distinct from the Friends of the Animal Shelter fund, or the funds that they maintained. And we do have some restricted donations that come in for a stated purpose, which I'll get into a little later more specifically. If they're not restricted in some way, they can be donations to the animal shelter for their use. Some of the objectives of this fund Animal shelter improvements. We recently used it for additional kennel space because we have so many dogs. We put in synthetic turf in a court hold area for exercising court hold dogs or larger dogs. Looking for efficiencies for compliance with the Kansas Pet Animal Care Act from the state of Kansas. We air conditioned the garage space in the animal shelter. It was already heated, but it was not air conditioned. And we sealed the floor. We put down an epoxy coating on the floor so it can be easily cleaned. The state of Kansas does require temperature requirements for the holding of dogs and cats. Trap, neuter, spay, release program, surgeries and supplies relating to feral cats. Since April, we have did surgeries for trap, neuter, release for about 85 to 90 cats, which really makes an impact on that feral cat community. We've done it 3 times where we did a dedicated day just for surgery for spay and neuters for trap, neuter, release animals, cats.
Jeff, you might touch on the surgery center that was funded with donations and then how we staff that as well.
Thank you. The surgery center is, the full name is Smedley Surgery Center. And that was used by, we did that improvement to an old garage space or storage or shed space, and we converted it into a surgery center. Was that 3 years ago or so? Using donation funds primarily from the Smedley family and their generous donation to use that space for that trap, neuter, release program, for public surgeries, for our surgeries for our own cats and dogs that the animal shelter has in their possession. It's been very successful. It's been used at least once a week for many weeks, unless there's an unavailability from the veterinarian who we contract. Care and welfare and some of the equipment, and going on along that as well, some of the equipment that we have in the surgery center to support surgeries has also been used, donation funds have been used to support that as well. Care and welfare of animals is one of our primary objectives of using those funds. Microchips, using local veterinarians for more advanced care for certain animals who need that care, and then funding that contracted shelter veterinarian for surgeries related to animals that are in the shelter's care for spay and neuter, for rabies vaccinations, for microchipping, things like that. The best thing about having a surgery on Thursday, which is what our typical Thursday day is that those animals can be turned around and made available very quickly after that surgery. Generally Saturdays, we have a lot of new animals coming in from that surgery, and they're immediately publicly available on that Saturday. So Saturdays are typically always our busiest day at the shelter. Fridays and Saturdays, really, but Saturdays more so. We're open from 10 to 2, and we do a lot of adoptions on Saturdays. Giving you an idea of the donation revenues and expenses that we had from 2023. Revenues on the left. And you can see the restricted and unrestricted ones. The restricted general donations are simply donations made by the public for a specific objective, whether it be food, veterinary care, what have you. Then on the right side of the column, the restricted expenses are, spay and neuter program is where we pay that veterinarian, that contracted veterinarian for the spay and neuters that happen for shelter animals. And then that's the number of donations we did receive on the bottom right. number of memory and honorariums donations, number of cats, and number of dog donations. And then I provided a three-year look at donation revenues and expenses relating to donations. This shows a trend of consistent donations and a somewhat consistent use of those donated funds. Historically, we have received some pretty consistent, relatively large donations from some of the larger Greater Salina Community Foundation, some of the larger organizations in town who support the animal shelter. We get somewhat consistent on getting donations from them. Any questions at this point in time relating to what I already? Okay. Moving on. Right, I provided a graphic that we recently did on the wall of the animal shelter recognizing donations and memorials. The names are on there of people who did donate toward the animal shelter. And then the memorial graphic is names in which people donated to memorialize someone. Staff have some have a greater vision of what the donation wall would look like, or memorial wall would look like, and you've seen some of those in various places. And I gave you a few examples of what we found, what we like to do. The walls inside the animal shelter lobby are need to be. We would need to look at that a little more closer. It's basically a drywall on top of masonry block. We need to do some improvements to that so we can have a better mounting surface than what we have now. Staff have been, for the past year and a half, staff have been focusing greatly on the care and cleaning and exercise, welfare of animals, being so full. And we've also been focusing last year and this year on the compliance with the Kansas Pet Animal Care Act. But our goal is to accomplish this early 2025, before cat season starts, before summer starts. We have not got that greater vision accomplished yet, is what I'm trying to say, for memorials and for donations and recognizing them inside the shelter. Staffing at the shelter this year so far has been relatively consistent. We have had one staff member on medical leave. We do have some in the future, we do have some vacancies occurring that we are aware of that we'll need to replace. We did add full-time staff members in 2023. We added a full-time cleaning position and a half-time cleaning position. One person is responsible for cleaning of dogs at full-time, and one is responsible for cleaning cats at that half-time position. We also added a admin one, or a receptionist position, that is full-time, and that's been greatly helpful. One of the biggest impacts we've made this year, or in early last year, is hiring temp seasonal staff for dog walkers. To comply and they've been great help to make sure we're exercising animals, socializing animals, getting them outside on a regular basis, and that's been a huge thing to help with that. As I say in the middle there, it's been proved effective in performing required tasks and organizing required paperwork relating to the requirements of the state of Kansas, and also providing that information to inspectors who come and inspect us, and providing documentation for the cleaning that we do, and for the exercise that we do, and the feeding and watering that we do, so we can document that. And some of those tasks were some of the tasks as well that were previously completed by the Friends of the Animal Shelter. As always, we're committed to identifying and implementing process improvements at the shelter. In 2024, there has been 2 inspections from the state of Kansas, and they were based on anonymous complaints, but those complaints have been were found to be unfounded complaints. We did last week have a 3rd inspection. Those results of that inspection have not been released to us yet. Oh, I just got a note that said the report came back and it was also found to be unfounded. So three inspections this year, and all 3 were found to be unfounded based on the complaint. Friends of the Salina Animal Shelter, they dissolved their organization. Was dissolved effective June 28th of 2024. I provided a list of duties that the Friends of the Animal Shelter typically provided. The first 7 of them, staff have picked up and are doing these 7 items, which includes photos of animals, food giveaways, picking up food from people who donate the food, whether it be Dillon's, Walmart, Sam's Club, Target. They all donate food, and we pick that up and make it available for people who have a need to have food for their animal, and we make that available to them. Staff are doing enrichment for dogs, filling up these little toys with peanut butter to give to the dogs, giving them treats, picking up donations, as I said. We've always helped with cat adoptions, staff of, but that was a primary thing that the Friends of the Animal Shelter did, was assist with the cats. And they didn't actually do the adoption per se, but they gave a lot of information about bringing cats out of the kennel for people to socialize with, things like that. And then helping off-site events such as at Petco and doing laundry. And as you can see, the last 2 items we have not picked up at this time, which was providing assistance, financial assistance for veterinary care or for spay and neuter for their animal, for their private animal. We have not picked that up. The next slide is relating to continuing by the Friends of the Animal Shelter. And I kind of I've repeated some of this in here that I've already talked about. Adoption fees are currently low. They're very low because of how full we are. We kind of have a sliding scale based on how occupied or how much inventory of cats and dogs we have. And once we reach certain thresholds of how full we are, we do reduce prices for adoptions for cats and dogs, even for the dogs that are very easily adoptable or high demand, which includes puppies, for example. Puppies are always in high demand, but those are also discounted. Staff are exploring the means and methods of a volunteer program, what that could look like. I need to have a plan, that they are working on a plan for me to see, and I can share with the city manager. Who's going to monitor that? Who's going to supervise that? So there's all questions I have relating to that volunteer program. Staff do desire to have a volunteer program, but we're going to do it according to a plan that is approved. Right now we are focusing on volunteerism only for fostering. We have a foster program. Fostering does require certain things to be accomplished that are based on the Kansas Pet Animal Care Act that are required to be done. They basically, as a foster, have to comply with all aspects of the Kansas Pet Animal Care Act, including their home, including separating of dogs and cats, and so they are subject to inspection in their home if they want to become a foster. So there is quite a few requirements that they need to comply with to be a foster in their home. As I stated previously, we have 12 cats in foster right now, no dogs in fostering right now. As I said, this is our main focus right now is for volunteerism is fostering. Is there any questions at this time relating to anything? Yes, Mr. Commissioner Davis.
Just out of curiosity, does the Kansas Pet and Animal Care Act cover private pets in private homes, or just
It does not.
just shelters?
It's just for
and
shelters,
foster-
humane
okay.
societies,
Pet stores.
rescues.
Pet stores, I believe. I could be wrong about that. though.
I'm not sure. I don't recall if it's pet stores. My recollection is humane societies, rescues, and animal shelters.
Again, second question. Did the Friends of the Animal Shelter ever provide in-home services for folks in town? I'll just make up something. If an older person can't get out and walk their dog, or they need help cleaning up the dog
I
run.
think if someone asked, they probably would have provided that. I couldn't speak directly if they did or did not, but based on their desire to care for animals, I think they would probably help people out. If they had the people to help out. You know, their volunteer numbers there at the end were approximately 18 staff or 18 volunteers.
That might be a nice outreach opportunity. Okay.
Thank you.
Previously, Kansas State University Mobile Clinic visited here. I can't recall how long ago that's been or why it was discontinued, but do you have information on that and what it would take to bring them back?
I might need to ask for Monique's assistance on this, but we have reached out periodically to them to ask if they're willing to come on an additional day, because we would love to have an additional day, and not just Thursdays, for example, for their services, for their students to come out and be trained. And we can, but it's not. So we have asked, and I think they're the ones that have said no. And I don't know why that is. Come on up.
On the calendar for 2024.
You need to come up here and talk to the microphone.
I apologize. We're not on the calendar for 2024, but I've requested for us to be put on the calendar for 2025. It could be that we have already a part-time vet there, and we do public services with our low-cost spay neuter. So I think they would want to reach out to shelters that do not have that in their shelter. I don't think it's a no per se, but I think they have to squeeze us into their calendar.
Thank you. Thank you. Continuing on, there's an attachment to this study session. It's the Shelter Planners of America Needs Assessment Report. Staff initiated this needs assessment for the with Shelter Planners of America for the animal shelter. That would help guide us for the future. The assessment reviewed the existing facility, the fixtures of the facility, looked at people levels in the community, animal levels that are currently being housed for the previous 3 years. They proposed a facility space program, site considerations, recommended features, staffing levels, all based on current thinking and current design standards for animal shelters, animal hospitals, things like that. Shelter Planners of America were specialists in animal shelters, humane societies, rescues. They identified needs an additional space for 42 dogs, remodeling of the existing large dog kennel space, creating new cat housing, supporting spaces. One thing I found interesting is that modern animal shelters were more related to the hospitals and retail than they were to warehousing or industrial. So the retail operation, you think Petco, you think you want to create an environment that's conducive to people wanting to interact with animals, to adopt animals. But on the back end of the animal control operation, it was almost like hospital grade as far as cleanliness, easy to clean, increased HVAC, air turnover, large overcapacity sewer drains, because of the amount of waste that gets generated from animal shelters. And as I listed here, the estimated cost of the report is of this proposal or of this from this needs assessment was $4.2 million to $5.6 million of estimated costs relating to those changes. The diagram that was provided, it's in the last page of the needs assessment, but there's a screenshot of that needs assessment. Additional parking on the bottom of the screen. Additional exercise yards, the 42 additional kennels to the west, which would be behind the existing animal shelter. And then the renovation of spaces inside the existing shelter to move things around to create more space for the needs for square footage of the animal shelter.
Commissioners, Jeff touched on it, but I would just underscore his point that it was obvious that they were specialists in this design and that there are efficiencies and advantages to be gained, not only from the materials, but from the configuration to be more conducive to cleaning, discourage the dogs being distracted or worked up. We don't have a blank slate to start over, but there certainly were things that were pointed out that could be facility improvements. And then the purpose of this was to do that as well as start to vision what the future might look like. Not knowing what the cost would be, but recognizing that the facility that we have has some age on it, and I don't know who designed it, but I don't know that it was specially designed as much as just designed with the best of intentions at the time.
Correct. Yeah.
Well, I have no problem with making improvements to make it more safe and suitable, clean. But an issue that we're going to have to deal with, I feel, before we spend money is the breed ban ordinance. I cannot go along with building a bigger shelter just to house dogs that have no place to go or future. And at some point, I think this commission is going to have to face it, either modify this ordinance. There's plenty of patterns out there that communities that have removed the breed ban but made a dangerous dog ordinance, or lose the no-kill shelter tag. I think we're going to have to someday make that choice. Is just building a bigger shelter to house dogs that have nowhere to go. And you said we transferred 5 dogs, pit bulls, to Newton. If I'm not comfortable having these dogs in Salina, why should I be comfortable having them in Newton? So it's a conversation I think we need to have, especially before we spend a lot of money.
So the dog park that's at the animal shelter was part of considerable conversations with these inspectors that had visited us last year and this year as well. Matter of fact, last time they came this year, they were surprised that we still were operating in allowing the public to use the dog park behind the shelter, whether it be in tandem with our needs and the public needs or not. And separating them out, it didn't. They were concerned that we have a public dog park behind the shelter that was used by not only the public but also our shelter dogs. We talked about this at the strategic planning session about looking for another opportunity for a dog park on the north end of Salina. As I stated in my slide, the Kansas Department of Agriculture highly recommended or provided a strong recommendation to close the public dog park behind the shelter and utilize the space only for shelter dogs. Staff closed the public dog park when it was necessary, and there was a negative reaction or a feedback from citizens relating to that. Even most recently, when we had a round of kennel cough going through the animal shelter, and we closed the public dog park, so we avoided the possibility of cross-contamination of the Bordetella virus or kennel cough. That did also have some negative consequences or negative comments from the public relating to the closing of it. And we did, staff have been pursuing a additional dog park space for the north end at the very close location to the current animal shelter. The next several slides are relating to that. Some of the benefits of replacing a replacement dog park to replace that public dog park, allowing the animal shelter space behind the shelter to be used for all the entire space to be used for shelter dogs. We can do improvements to that area to create a more efficient use of the space, to create runs so we can accommodate more animals and walk more animals quicker. I created a easier to maintain space. I talked about the kennel cough. Create a dedicated public dog park space for the north end of Salina. And it has easy access to parking at Carver Center parking lot. As you'll see as I come, the next few slides show a kind of a graphic of where we're proposing it to be. Some of the estimated costs, we're looking at about $144,000 just for materials related for that dog park, which does not include labor. An overview map of the shelter area, Carver Center area, John Parker Jr. Park. It's also, we normally call it or shorten it to Parker Park, but the full name is John Parker Jr. Park. And it shows where the animal shelter is in relation to Carver Center, where the parking lot is, and where we propose to put a smaller dog park. It's only 14,500 square feet, whereas the Barkley Park site is more closer to 87,000 square feet. So this it would not be a large dog park, but it would be have 3 sections. So we can close an area on a given time to maintain the grass and the turf. You can see where the current public dog park is behind the shelter, and in the context of that, provided some information relating to John Parker Jr. Park, and then and what kind of dog park we wish to do, which was somewhat modeled relating to Barkley Park. 3-pod system or 3 sections, with 1 for large dogs, 1 for small dogs, and 1 to be closed to allow for turf grass to be restored once a year. Irrigation of warm season grass, we want to put in irrigation. We want to provide water for dog bowls, some nice fence with black coated vinyl fencing, 6-foot high, mow strips so it's easier to maintain, so we don't have grass growing up through that fence. Of course, concrete sidewalks to make it accessible. Shade structures, solar lighting, solar LED lighting similar to Barkley Park. And then, of course, trees, benches, and other site amenities that would go along with that type of park. I gave 2 examples or 2 conceptual designs of what it looks like, what the proposal would be to look like. And it was somewhat modeled similarly to Barkley Park, except for a smaller size. And if there's any questions about those, any of these slides, please let me know.
Well, I can tell you that my veterinarian 30 years ago told me to stay away from the animal shelter for the reasons you cited. And I'm just surprised that we kept that dog park open as long as we did. But I am not in favor of this location. And I would like to see, before we build a new dog park, take care of the one we have and explore other locations. The location I have in mind is Centennial Park, which is the whole area south of the Friendship Center.
Mm-hmm.
As I know that we have a lot of housing units coming online here in the next couple of years over on the west side of Salina, and we have not improved anything over there for a long, long time.
I'm making notes.
And I'll try to respond a little bit. Commissioners, you may recall, as part of the Park Master Plan and Master Planning, Centennial Park was one of the items that was in that punch list. And so whether it's dog park or other improvements, I think that is on our radar. We don't necessarily have a timeline for that. But to your point, Mayor, it's been developing, Centennial Park's been in the conversation for quite a while. With respect to addressing this dog park, I think staff does feel a sense of urgency given the strong directive from the Kansas Department of Agriculture and then the strong reaction that we received from the volunteers and citizens when we tried to implement what we perceive to be requirements of the state. So whether it's at Parker Park or whether it's somewhere else, we do feel a sense of urgency to respond to the state's direction with respect to separating the use of the animal shelter dog park.
So how many housing units do you think we have coming online on the west side of Salina? 700?
Well, if you're counting the Salina destination, there's 500 right there.
No, Salina destination and Narrow Plains is what I'm counting.
Yeah, Narrow Plains is pretty far south, but there were like another 300 in 2 phases.
Yeah, there's going to be a lot of people with dogs with limited space.
You know, that point exactly would be, we might want to be one of those avant-garde communities where nobody lives more than 2.5 miles from a dog park. You know, in eastern cities, there are little pocket parks for dogs everywhere. You know, first nobody wanted them, and now everybody wants one in the neighborhood because you got all these dogs and nothing but city streets, no yards to exercise in.
There's a considerable amount of park ground on Schilling that's not in use, and it doesn't abut a lot of housing. If there's interest in additional dog park locations, as you're describing, that comes to mind in the Southwest.
Mm-hmm.
I think that location would be good in proximity to the interstate. As I've traveled, I'm amazed how many people travel with dogs.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
That'd be a great sign to have 30 miles south, you know, coming up out of Harvey County, you know.
Yeah.
Let your dog out at exit 90.
I think people travel, you know, just like I-70, they seek out opportunities for take their dog. And that's why I like the North End location, but it's just my thought. But off I-35 I think is what you're referring to, Mayor. Is that correct? On that north-south interstate. Mm-hmm.
I don't have feedback regarding the location, but in regard to the design, I do use the dog park over on east part of town, and one of the common feedbacks I get when they find out I'm a commissioner while I'm there is that the kind of that landing pad or that gathering area with the benches, it tends to be towards the entrance to the park, which makes sense until you start using the park. And it probably wouldn't be a bad idea to push it to the other corner, and kind of there's a buffer area for when people bring new dogs in versus the dogs that are currently in there, and they do tend to gather around their owners to sit at the bench. And it's kind of chaotic at times, depending on the personality of the dogs. But it's the one consistent feedback I hear that makes a lot of sense to me as somebody that uses the dog park as well, for what it's worth.
So having the entrances butted up together.
Well, more like, for instance, maybe another walkway to the far corner to the front of the park, if that makes sense. So if you would kind of push it to the, well, I'll just use right and left pertaining to, well, I'm on a different,
There you go.
there we go. So basically you would push that pad with the benches to that corner a little further right on each. So there you go, perfect. So basically do, and if you're on that far left one, you'd push it to the left.
Right.
And have a little walkway to that pad, which would be a little more concrete, but I think in terms of usability and even wear and tear on the park, because that area towards the fence, that tends to get a lot of back and forth because new people pull up and the dogs are curious, like who's coming in, and it's a lot of paw traffic that tears up turf. Just my feedback on it.
So with respect to dog park siting, I don't recall whether any of you were on the commission when Barclay Park was considered, but that wasn't the original location. The proposed location met with quite a bit of opposition out of concern about noise, and I think Barclay Park has performed well. Maybe the community perception has changed, but siting dog parks is can be an exercise. So part of the appeal, I think, from staff's perspective of this location was we're really just kind of staying in the same vicinity, trying to address that Department of Ag directive, staying in that same neighborhood, whether people are attached to that location or not. But if you, as the governing body, want to have more deliberations about whether we should proceed at this location or some alternate location, that's something we'd like to know, because we are trying to expedite going forward with responding to the Department of Ag.
And I think the dogs are very quick to point out most of the noise doesn't come from them, it comes from the owners. They get along great. I mean, it's like,
Right. Yeah, to your point, this location at Parker Park does not have a lot of residents around it. So it's kind of seems to be the most suitable location. Readily available on vacant ground that wouldn't have a neighborhood impact to it. As Mr. Scraggs said, we are a few weeks away from being prepared to go out to bid. So the more feedback you can provide relating to that, that'd be helpful.
And what budget is this going to come out of?
It was our intention, and what we have in the sub-CIP for this would be funded from the Animal Services Donation Fund at approximately $144,000 of material cost, which would not include labor for it.
Are you looking at city staff doing the project, or?
No, we were looking at a contractor to bid it out as a total project, to be a turnkey project. We might have some small inputs relating to overseeding, which we do with a lot of projects, or restoring of soil. We do that often within our park staff. But we were looking to do this as a kind of a one and done to get it done, rather than self-performing like we did with Barclay Park.
Are we thinking of drought-tolerant grass for turf?
We were thinking of a warm season grass, such as Bermuda, but that would probably come over time. We were looking to do as little disturbing of the existing turf that's there to get started with, and then over time make improvements to it like we are doing at Barclay Park currently. We would disturb some areas, of course, because of concrete, mow strips, fences, so we wanted to limit that, and we would have to oversee those areas. But our eventual goal would be to overseed with Bermuda, a tolerant grass, or heat tolerant grass is what I'm trying to say. Moving on, unless there's any other questions. Some other ideas or other things that have been discussed before, whether internally or with commissioners. Staff have approached the city manager 3 or 4 years ago relating to a shelter veterinarian, hiring a shelter veterinarian. A part-time shelter veterinarian is what I indicated on the slide. We currently contract a veterinarian. They come once a week. Over the course of the year, I think what I previously reported was we pay for shelter animals only to do the spay and neuters, and come once a week, we pay approximately $33,000 per year. That does not include what we do for public spay and neuters as well, which people pay for those for their private animals. So overall, we approximately are spending $80,000 per year on a contracted shelter veterinarian, but only being available once a week. And staff have made the request before about a part-time veterinarian that would have additional responsibilities, approximately 25 hours per week, to do examinations of animals upon intake, dental issues, euthanasia, routine diagnostics, investigations relating to animal cruelty, increase our spay and neuter capacities, our trap neuter release capacity, and provide some basic emergency care. This would not replace the need for a veterinary practice for more extensive things. It would not be a public clinic that anybody can come to. It's really for shelter needs. Estimated cost of a part-time shelter veterinarian is $75,000 to $80,000. It's really to increase live outcomes of the animals that we get surrendered to us or strays to us. And this position would be proposed to be paid from animal services donation funds as well. The last sentence on there, and as this was previously proposed to the city manager, we had some inconsistent funding. We were getting Petco grants at the time, but based on the recent stabilization of the donation funds we do get that were unrestricted use, it seems like a viable approach at this time, based on the 3-year history of the donation fund that we have been receiving. Staff have also been looking at additional kennel spaces to help house and care for dogs that are our property, but not available for adoption. And a kennel owner approached the city, approached the animal services staff, about the possibility of renting a private kennel space or a non-city or a non-public space for the use by the animal shelter. Staff have looked at that space, and it's not in a move-in condition. It would take some inputs or improvements to be done by city staff to make it a compliant with Kansas Pet Animal Care Act. We, as estimated, be about $150,000 of improvements to make it compliant or make it more susceptible to passing those inspections. This space would be under the animal shelter. It would be subject to inspection and visitation by the Kansas Department of Ag Pet Animal Care Act folks. It is a private space, and it would require public dollars to make those improvements. However, the person that we've been negotiating with or talking with is interested in, and like I said, they approached us. They are interested in a long-term lease, or they are willing to discuss a long-term lease. They're not willing to sell. So some of the improvements that we would need to do is some automatic watering. It is a kennel space that has access to outdoors, so it's not like we have to leash up a dog, take them to a outdoor space. We would just open up a door and they would go outside. So it has that improvement or that capability within it. There are plumbing repairs that need to occur. We need to visually barrier off each kennel so the dogs don't see each other. The kennels are in and of themselves right now too small for housing dogs. We would have to do some fence work to create a larger space for those dogs. Ceiling tiles, some cosmetic repairs, painting, some equipment that we would need to for this operation. As I said, they are open to a long-term lease. They let's see, we would need to staff at least 8 hours a day, if not more, if more dogs are over there. It would require a input of staff. But the idea being that we would offset the dogs that are in our current animal shelter and we would transfer them over there. They're not adoptable, but they are our property, and it would be, and just so happens that the kennel space is within 2 blocks of the existing animal shelter. It's pretty close. The owner of this facility did give me her permission to indicate who it is a kennel operation at Family Animal Care on North Street. And she did give me permission to say that publicly. She wasn't worried about that. Again, it is a private space, privately owned, but in theory, these improvements over a long-term lease could be the rent, is how I'm looking at it. Might want to stop there if there's any questions about that, or not stop there, but pause there if there's any questions relating to that.
So this would be long-term space for dogs that have nowhere to go.
Correct.
And that
Yes.
goes back to my previous point. We need to look at this BSL ordinance or lose the no-kill designation. As it's inhumane to just house dogs, keep them pinned up indefinitely.
Moving on, Barkley Dog Park. Just giving you some details about Barkley, because I think the remainder of the slides, a lot of them have to do with Barkley Dog Park improvements to be done there. In 2016, Barkley Dog Park was brought online. It was the only contractor we had working on that was for fencing. The majority of that, the remaining items were done by staff. And then whether it be concrete or seed or the solar lights or the water line that was brought in for the dog bowls, that was a staff-driven project. The commission action at the time was to use $80,000 of the donated animal funds to be put towards Barkley Park. The overall cost was actually $132,000 when all said and done. That included those additional things that were not part of the initial action, the solar lights, We replaced the turf with warm season grass there, added more concrete than we originally proposed. As I said before, Barclay Park operates on 3 sections, a small dog park, a large dog park, and one is closed currently, or on a yearly basis, for that grass to be restored, turf to be healed, and for grass to be reseeded to allow it to heal. Matter of fact, right now, we are in a 4th day of a closure of Barclay Dog Park, all 3 sections, to address a weed or weeds that occurs in that dog park. It'll be open tomorrow morning, so I guess today would be the 5th day. We did have 2 of those days. It was closed already because of races at the runway for a special event permit. So we felt it best to try to get this done. It required a 5-day pre-emergent application to prevent this weed called little barley, which has a seed head that gets embedded in dogs' paws. And there was a concern about that, and we understood or recognized that concern. So this pre-emergent that's being put down will have the benefit or impact in the spring, that June to July timeframe, or even May to July timeframe when that weed comes out. It'll go a long way to prevent most of that from coming. It won't get all of it, but it's a kind of a yearly exercise to improve the turf quality of the dog park. I kind of equated it to walking barefoot in grass at a water park. You don't want to put things in that turf that would cause people to harm their feet. You wouldn't want to plant clover at a water park because bees are attracted to clover and people step on bees with bare feet. So I kind of looked at it in that regard, is that also additionally part of the master plan has a lot to do with improving turf at various parks across our community. This was one area that we certainly can make those improvements to. Turf wear contributes to bare dirt and weed growth. We had a lot of feedback about the stickers, and we're addressing it. It most likely will be a yearly exercise to address those weeds in Barclay Park. As I stated,
those that contributed to the park, you left out, I can't think of his name, Eagle Scout. I think his name was Stockham.
Yes, Eric Stockham.
Yep.
And he did an Eagle Scout project for the benches and for the sign holder. Earlier this year, we had that sign renovated or had it redone, and we reached out to him. He gave us his binder, his Eagle Scout binder, and we went through his binder, and he let us borrow it, and we had it repainted, and we had the sign repaired. We found the sign shop that he took it to and had it done at, and we had it restored. Yep. So, yes. We could not find the benches. We were having trouble finding the benches that he purchased or he made. Yes. So recently at the July Parks and Rec Advisory Board, a group of Barclay Dog Park users approached the board about some requested amenities. The remaining slides are kind of an attempt to address some of those with the ability to close certain sections. As we close them, some of these can be incorporated. We've already talked about the turf. And their desire was to make it more of a premium or destination dog park, including shade structures, agility equipment, improved turf for grass, more seating, more wind blockage, and a future water feature for dogs and a future bathroom for humans. Also, the possibility of adding more space onto the existing dog park, whether it be a 4th pod or section to the north, or some additional run space so a dog can be isolated from the larger group. Talked about grass and landscaping at Barclay Park already, but it is a very popular place, heavily used, which impacts the quality of the turf, and it creates opportunities for weed growth to occur. I talked about Little Barley a little bit. I've already talked about that some as we have looked at using landscaping to block wind in several different areas, in several different parks, using a columnar type pine or columnar type evergreen, whether that be at the dog park or at pickleball, or blocking visually areas using landscaping versus fencing or screening of some type, wind screening. So that's certainly a possibility. Looking at restrooms at Barclay Dog Park, restrooms were previously discussed at an Animal Control Advisory Board, and they were not recommended by that board at that time, and that was 4 to 5 years ago. And I believe it has to do with the difficulty of getting utilities to the area. The closest sanitary sewer is on the other side of Markley, or on the west side of Markley. So we'd have to go underneath the road and underneath the runway to get water there, or find a path around the runway to get sewer over to that bathroom. So the nearest bathroom is by fields 3 and 4, which is over a half mile away. Also, the Animal Control Advisory Board at one point in time asked for information relating to splash pads, or dog splash pads, to be installed. It's the city's general desire to always capture water so it can be returned to the system. Again, sanitary sewer was difficult to get to that area. I put some cost estimates of what it would take to put a bathroom on the bottom paragraph there. Total estimated between $160,000 and $180,000 for a bathroom there, including utility work. Based on some recent conversations with baseball folks, and possibly of long-term improvements to be done at Tower Field, or which is now called Wilbur Field. It could be a dual purpose of having a bathroom there in the future, whether one to serve Barclay Park and one to serve the now called Wilbur Field. That is right now a practice field, but who knows, in the future it could become a game field with the addition of lights and scoreboard and such. Synthetic turf at Barclay Dog Park, it's pretty expensive. We put it into a small area of the of the Salina Animal Shelter that was always muddy. It was always wet. They always had to clean dogs' paws after using it. So we put in a small section of synthetic turf for that area. It was $18.50 per square foot. So looking at a size of synthetic turf for or canine turf is what it's called, for the dog park is relatively cost prohibitive. It's about $536,000 per section for that, using that same cost per square foot. Again, there certainly would be some savings relating to how big the area is. Usually they manufacture that in 15-foot rolls, so additional shade structures at Barclay Park. I think that from the most repeated request that I heard from the Barclay Park group was shade. The shade structure that's there is relatively small. They did request more shade. We put in shade recently, shade structures at Bill Burke Park at about $7,000 each. That was a 15 by 20 shade structure. So that was just the material alone. We would need to do other improvements, a concrete pad under it, maybe provide some picnic tables, benches. There is a future sub-CIP area, sub-CIP allotment for shade structures at Barclay Park under using those animal donation funds. I think it's in 2025 or 2026. I don't recall which year. But that is something that was on staff's plan to put in additional shade structures. Agility equipment at Barclay Park. I gave an example of what I found from a supplier. This was about $9,000 to buy that equipment, not including installation. The agility equipment can provide, can serve both small dogs and large dogs. Staff had done some little bit of work and found that other dog parks that have agility equipment, I often found them to be in concrete areas, which I don't believe is the ideal dog park to have a concrete slab over the entire dog park. However, it is a bit difficult to keep grass alive underneath a piece of agility equipment. You can see the picture shows mulch. Staff would recommend either concrete around that area so it can be easily mowed around and also easily maintained, or a synthetic turf, or a pour-in-place surface that would hold its shape and not be dug up by dogs and moved by dogs and things like that. We did have one commenter relating to people who wants to throw tennis balls. These might consider being obstructions to some of those people, but we don't need to put them in all the dog parks. It could be in certain dog parks. And I mentioned additional sections of runs or additional sections or runs at Barclay Park. We did not have any estimates of that, of additional fencing and gates. So that's based on the popularity of Barclay Dog Park. It would be easily used. Their comment to me and comment to the board was there are times in which the large dog park gets so used and so well loved that there's so many dogs in there at one time, they would love to have an additional space to be able to separate certain dogs or get some more choices. Right now there's a small dog park, one's closed, so all the large dogs go into one section. They would love the opportunity to choose a different section for the larger dogs. Is there any questions about anything I've previously reported on?
A quick question on Barclay Park. Is there, so there's no water there for irrigation for watering the turf?
There is.
There is, okay.
Yeah, there is water for irrigation and water for the dog bowls. It's
Okay.
probably from the same water line, most
Okay.
likely.
I just saw utilities to get to Barclay at 60,000.
It's really about sewer and
okay.
electric.
Okay.
We don't
I
have
thought
any
there-
electric.
Okay.
Sorry. And I couldn't speak to how large that water line is that would serve a bathroom. I'm not sure if it's a 1-inch line, smaller than that, I don't know. But there is a water line present.
Is it not possible to use septic out there?
Septic?
Like a septic tank or?
It's, we generally, I haven't really investigated that, so I wouldn't know. Generally, you need a leaching field, and I'm showing my ignorance relating to septic systems.
I don't know either. I just.
We did have a brief conversation about a force main where it goes to a pillar, a column in the ground, and goes to that, then it gets pumped to a location. Because otherwise you're looking at gravity. You need to have something gravity fed, and how can you get that slope you need to get the gravity to where the sewer is now? But a force main could save a little bit of money, but it also could solve that problem of getting it of gravity and not having the right slope. We also looked, we have had some conversations, which I'm not a fan of, is a vault type toilet, but then that has a regular ongoing expense relating to its, taking the contents out and hauling it away. And I'm not, and then there's a smell associated with that as well.
So how close would we be if, and again, I do not use Barclay Park, to having a fourth fenced-in area up there? Is that something we're considering fairly seriously?
It's possible to be done. You can go to the north and add a section. It requires some concrete sidewalk. The parking is already there, of course. And add another light, solar light fixture, and additional fencing.
I could just see another run taking some of the wear and tear off the turf, and that's why I asked about irrigation if we had the ability to water, because sometimes when you water, you don't want them on that right away. And I gotta admit, not knowing the usage, I'm totally amazed every time I drive by there, the number of cars. So I would be in favor of looking at just extending and putting a fourth one in up at Barclay, at least for now. I just think that.
Yeah,
and again, I guess I say that, but I guess maybe there needs to be a survey of the individuals that use that on a daily basis. I'm probably not a good one to quote. I'm just looking at the number of vehicles I see up there when I go by.
Probably a resounding yes. I mean, I'd be in favor of it as well. I mean, it just makes more sense because that large dog area, it gets a lot of wear and tear, and again, larger dogs, and it's not as good on turf.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they do. I don't know if it's double or triple, but it causes that much more quicker to be to restore those areas after a large dog park than a small dog park.
And I think that shows you how successful additional, even smaller dog parks all around town. Anyone out there has driven out there, for the most part. I mean, there are a few people who could walk over there, but if you remove that barrier, I think the usage goes way up.
Yeah, and again, whether we do multiple small ones or, we'd also talked about the area over there by Sunset Park, so, there may be a need for a second one somewhere. I don't know how you figure, how you calculate where the best place for that second dog park is, or two smaller ones, but it does seem like there is a need. So
the area at Sunset Park where the horseshoe's at is, we did look at that as far as square footage and trying to do a 3-section dog park. It's, as it is right now, it's too small. We felt it's too small for that area. Now there's obviously land relating to the south of Sunset Park as well.
What would your opinion be on having two smaller ones versus a big one? Would the smaller ones not get as much use as, would it be worth doing that?
We have looked at several locations as we've discussed here today, whether it be Centennial, Sunset, Indian Rock, Parker Park. So we have thoughts about adding more, and we've started assigning some budgetary numbers to it in the future 10-year sub-CIP. The primary one was for at Parker Park, which is adjacent to Carver Center, so we can serve the north end, but also alleviate some pressure from the Kansas Department of Agriculture relating to inspections. That was our method to our madness relating to smaller dog parks.
Have you considered surveying the dog community to where they would want a dog park?
Yeah, we certainly can do that, and I sound like a broken record maybe, but at least from my perspective, given the public dialogue that's taken place, given the complaint-driven inspections at the animal shelter, given the feedback from the Kansas Department of Agriculture, my highest priority in all these conversations has been resolve the animal shelter dog park issue. I almost see those as two separate items. Addressing the responding to the Department of Agriculture's feedback, and then we can have a conversation about additional dog parks and where to locate them. Now, having said that, we could do something in that general vicinity, but for me, given the way that this has played out, the way those conversations have played out, the struggle that staff has had with feedback, I would like to resolve the animal shelter dog park issue as soon as possible.
One question along that line of thinking: if we weren't already in the habit of having a public use space there, would that be a location that would even be considered one of the prime spots to put a new dog park in?
It may not.
'Cause there's a lot. I mean, there's housing nearby, but there's a lot of industrial space around there as well.
It kind of takes you back to that conversation of, are you trying to site them in residential neighborhoods, or are you trying to site them in proximity to a residential neighborhood but not backing up to houses? As Mr. Hammond said, the Parker Park location is actually fairly, it's in a residential area, but it's not immediately adjacent to residential, which is a selling point in some respects.
Because I don't know if they're any noisier than playgrounds with guys playing basketball and soccer and kids running around screaming and yelling.
Yeah. Agreed. Part of it's perception versus reality and what it takes to get a neighborhood to be receptive to it.
My opinion would be, like you said, to go with the Parker Park, just proceed with that one, and then if we want to add more in the future, have that conversation down the road.
Well, I still think we need to get input from the dog community. And I'm looking at where the greater populations in the future of Salina is going to be growing. And
I think this is one of those build it and they will come entities.
I would agree. In fact, I was going to reference that you'd said that in the past, and I think it's a foregone conclusion. If we build a dog park at any location, it is going to get used. And I mean, I'm not saying we should just pepper the whole town with them for budgetary reasons, but I think it feels like we get a lot of bang for the buck. I mean, if we're talking around 150,000 to put one in with three separate areas, I mean, I think that would make a lot of taxpayers happy.
Do we know what the annual maintenance cost is on Barkley when you look at cleanup and mowing and that type of stuff?
I do not know, and I couldn't ballpark something, but it does get mowed, once or twice a week in the season. When we do close it, we do overseed, so there's a cost of seed. But I would say it's not a large number, but and we did buy benches, which not, when we renovated the one space, we did buy some additional benches. But I wouldn't say it was a large number.
And I apologize for butting in, but I would suggest that you could take it as a two-step process. You could do both. We could address the dog park issue at the animal shelter, and we could then start a community conversation about additional dog park locations.
Because we could remedy what the dog shelter needs without necessarily putting in a public use dog park.
Well, we started down that road, and that was not well received at all. The immediate response was, it's just a dog park for the animal shelter dogs. That did not go over well at all.
More use of that public dog park there than what probably a lot of folks would have realized.
Sure.
Yeah, okay. That's fair.
well, I like the idea of putting another pod up at Barkley to alleviate the overcrowding, and you could, if there wasn't an overcrowding, you could rotate them every 2 weeks so the grass could recover. And then the congestion at the entrance that Commissioner Linkowitz brought up, I think that would be solved by just moving the benches in the shade.
Well, if we redo the one downtown, that's another thing you can advertise for folks visiting downtown. If you have your pet with you, just 4 blocks away, bring Fido over and get some exercise.
That is true, and I don't know if dogs are allowed in the Lee Hardware Building
Yes.
apartments, but
They are.
And
there's
they're
gonna
allowed
be
in the
more housing
hotel.
coming
right?
online there.
They're there and in the hotel downtown. So.
They are putting a small dog park in with synthetic turf at the Lee building.
Oh, they are? Okay.
It's relatively
Destination.
small, so they do allow dogs.
Salina Destination is supposed to put in a small dog park too.
Well, for the same reason, we probably need men's rooms and ladies' rooms out at Barclay. As long as we have a 3-minute break in between this session and the next, it would be appreciated.
Well, we have plenty of water there. The water tower's right there. So. Okay, anything else?
I do not have anything else. The last slide has a kind of a summary of feedback if you wish to give anything else relating to the part-time shelter veterinarian, off-site kennel space. It sounded like there was an additional section of Barclay Park that was something of interest. Didn't know what else could be.
I think that agility equipment's a neat idea, personally. Again, you put it out there, the dogs somehow know they're supposed to use it.
Is a part-time veterinarian something that is even, there's veterinarians that take part-time jobs like that?
There's a somewhat of a difference between a private practice veterinarian and a specialization of shelter veterinarian. So one is more for community service, and the other is for going into practice or being part of a practice.
I just question being able to hire someone.
I think it could be something that would be adjacent, a second job, possibly for someone else.
Okay. Well, I wish we had time to take public comment, but we do not. We have to get ready for the regular meeting, so feel free to contact any of us and take your input, and we will be back here at 4 o'clock for our regular meeting. Good afternoon. Welcome to the September 9th, 2024 meeting of the Salina City Commission. I'll ask staff if the Kansas Open Meetings Act required notice has been provided.
Yes.
Thank you. May we have a roll call?
Mayor Longbine,
Here.
Commissioner Davis,
Here.
Commissioner Hoppick,
Here.
Commissioner Ivy,
Here.
Commissioner Linkowitz.
Here.
Thank you. May all who are willing and able please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, followed by a moment of silence. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. We have no public hearings. That will bring us to item 4, the consent agenda.
Item 4.1, approve the minutes of the meeting of August 26th, 2024. Item 4.2, approve resolution number 24-8237, updating the City of Salina urban area boundary. Item 4.3, approve resolution number 24-8239, authorizing the election of the City of Salina to opt out of the settlement class in both the Tyco Fire Products LP and BASF Aqueous Film Forming Foams product liability litigation cases. And item 4.4, approve resolution number 24-8241, consenting to assignment of Wheat State Hospitality Inc.'s transferee agreement to 1858 Properties, LLC.
Thank you. Is there any public comment on a consent agenda item? Is there any item a commissioner would like to remove? I see none. I would entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
Mayor Longbine, I move that we approve consent agenda items 4.1, 4.2, 4.3, and 4.4.
I'll second that.
A motion is second to approve the consent agenda. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. That will bring us to administration. Item 5.1.
Item 5.1, approve Charter Ordinance number 44, repealing Charter Ordinance number 30, and approve Ordinance number 24-11219, amending the City of Salina Municipal Code relating to salaries for the Board of Commissioners and Mayor.
Mr. Hennessy.
Commissioners, what you have before you is two different items. The first one is a charter ordinance, and the second one is the ordinance which actually adjusts the overall salary for the city commissioners. I'll give you a little bit of background and history first on this, and then talk about the process and as we go forward. So, in 1963, city commissioner salaries were initially set at $100 for city commissioners, and the mayor received $150. The equivalent of that nowadays would be the $100 would be $1,031.28, and the $150 equivalent in purchasing power would be $1,546.92, and that would be as of July of this year. They have not got the August and September numbers calculated, so that would be the purchasing power of those numbers since then. In 1989, they decided to consolidate to pay all city commissioners the same. So city commissioners then all just received a flat fee of $100, including the mayor, and that went on for another 10 years. Then in May of 1999, that was the last adjustment to commissioner salaries, and that was when the salaries were set at $300. That $300 in 1999 would have a purchasing power equal to $567.76 as of July of 2024. The reason why you have before you two different items, one is a charter ordinance, one is the actual ordinance, is because again, more on the background, the very first charter ordinance the city adopted was what set the salaries at $100 in 1963. If you remember, or you may not, but in 1960, Home Rule was passed. And what Home Rule, one of the functions of that was to allow the passage of charter ordinances. Well, what is a charter ordinance? A charter ordinance is something that when the Kansas statutes don't apply equally to all different cities, Under the Home Rule Authority, you have the ability to, quote, charter out of that statute. And so that very first charter ordinance that was adopted in 1963 was the one that set the $100 city commissioner pay rate. Before that, the salaries were set by statute, and they varied depending upon the size of the city. That's the reason why you could charter out of it. Now, it is important to note that we do have a charter ordinance because under the Kansas Constitution, charter ordinances remain in effect until replaced by another charter ordinance, or if the legislature comes in and applies standards uniformly. So in order to adjust this salary, you have to have another charter ordinance. In 2015, the Kansas legislature did remove the statutory section in 12-1008, which set these different classes of pay rates for different sizes of cities. So this would be the last time you would have to adopt a charter ordinance in order to adjust the pay rate. Since that statute was repealed in 2015, any further adjustments in the future would just require the ordinance. So the charter ordinance is what requires one of the first steps to be in place. There's several requirements for a charter ordinance. It has to be passed by 4 out of the 5 commissioners voting in the affirmative, and there has to be a 60-day period after which there could be a petition filed to oppose the adoption of the charter ordinance. So the charter ordinance wouldn't go into effect until 61 days after its approval this evening. The ordinance itself, which adjusts the salary, would have an effective date starting of January 1st, 2025. And the way the ordinance is currently drafted, it would change city commissioner salaries from $300 per month to $600 per month, and it would change the mayor's salary from the flat $300, which is the same as commissioners, to $1,000. You have the ability to modify that amount in whatever way that you would like to see. Additionally, the ordinance envisions there's 2 additional items in the ordinance which is present. Starting on January 1st, 2026, there would be an automatic inflation factor, which is the CPI-U index that would be applied to the city commissioner's salary. However, that would only be in effect under the current ordinance, the way it's drafted, if there was a employee cost of living allowance included in the budget for that year. So if you were to vote in favor of both the charter ordinance and the ordinance this evening, and there was no petition in opposition to the charter ordinance, the salaries would be adjusted effective January 1st, 2025. And then in January 2026, there would be potentially a CPI-U salary adjustment to the salaries, but that would only occur if there was a cost of living increase for City of Salina employees in the current fiscal budget year. Those are kind of the very broad parameters of it. And again, I know it's kind of bizarre because the statutory section has been repealed in regards to establishing local officials' salaries, but under the Kansas Constitution, a charter ordinance remains unless it's repealed by another charter ordinance. So even though the statute that was in place that we had to charter out under from, our charter ordinance set the salaries at $300, so we need to repeal that in order to adjust them. In the future, any modification to the salaries would only require you to adopt a standalone ordinance without having to go through the charter ordinance process. It's somewhat Byzantine, I realize, but I wanted to kind of go over with that and explain that to you. If you have any other questions, I'd be happy to talk with them about it. The fiscal impact, so currently your combined salaries equals $18,000 a year, $300 times 12 times 5. With the way the ordinance is currently drafted, that amount would increase on an annual basis from $18,000 to $40,800 would be the overall fiscal amount. It would have extremely minimal impact on our budget. Then there would be, again, those very small potential adjustments the January of 1st in later years for the CPI adjustment factor. And I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Questions for Mr. Hennessy?
2 questions. Is the CPIU the exact same index that's used for the city employees?
I'm sorry, what was that?
Is the CPIU the exact same index that's used for city employee increases?
No, it's not currently in place to use the CPI. When we drafted this ordinance, we wanted to have something that basically would allow us to be able to calculate it. Current City of Salina employees, the cost of living, it varies. It depends upon the budgetary situation, but it is not currently used for employee salary adjustments.
It's a reference point, but ultimately you as the governing body have discretion to set whether there's any at all and then what it might be.
So it's possible that the commissioner's salary could go up a higher percentage than city employee. Both would be getting an increase, but different increases?
In this format, yes, technically.
I have written out here, and I've talked to city staff about this, that I think the way this should read, and this is, I got to admit, this is one thing I like about this ordinance is, you know, this is a awkward conversation to have, giving yourself a raise. I do it at my office, but that's a whole different story. But the fact that we're going to take care of, hopefully, you know, increasing the amount. So in 10, 15, 20 years, the individual sitting up here do not have to have this discussion. I think the way I would word this, and again, I think when we talked about this, I'm the one that used the CPI because that's kind of what you're used to, but I would word Section B to read that the cost of living adjustment shall be equal to the cost of living percentage extended to city employees. Because it would be awkward for me for us to give a city employee a 2% raise and then the CPI would justify us getting a 3%. So I think it just makes sense to make that percentage equal to the amount that that's being extended to city employees.
And the other nice thing about that actually is if budget did not allow any increase at all, then we would be
Section C
the same thing.
It addresses that if city employees do not receive a raise, neither do we. So.
And what was our cost of living increase this past year? Was it 4%?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
And just technical basis, in that we would, you know, not breaking the bank or making any of us millionaires when we vote on that cost of living increase for city employees. Is there any conflict of interest in?
It's a good
including ourselves in that group.
Yeah,
that's there's a trade-off, obviously, because then if you know, it really depends. You can certainly structure the ordinance in such a way. I believe you certainly vote and approve the budget every year, so you would still have that ability. That doesn't mean that somebody won't accuse you of being a conflict of interest, but I believe that you in your role have the ability and the responsibility to approve an annual budget. The city manager prepares the budget, so I don't believe it actually would be a conflict of interest. I'd certainly be happy to talk to the city council in regards to that, but again, it's your responsibility to adopt and set the budget, and the Kansas legislature has made you setting your own salary your own obligation. So
yeah, I'm sitting here trying to remember all the different conflicts of interest, material, et cetera, and I didn't know if legally they would be an immediate challenge.
As we staffed this through, we talked about this scenario, and no concern was raised by legal counsel about it being a conflict. We didn't, and I agree with Mr. Hennessy's overview. We didn't specifically ask that question, and it's not entirely fair to put it on Mr. Norris, who's here today from Clark, Mize, and Linville. That wasn't a question we anticipated, but my suggestion would be that I think the analysis is correct. You could adopt it. If there is a concern, it'd most likely be a disclosure, or we'd figure out how to address that going forward.
Well, while you're talking about legal counsel, I just picture this as a young Greg Bingston.
Yeah, there's a little bit of resemblance
real
there.
similarities. And this is
Jeff Norris.
Jeff Norris.
Yep. If it's helpful, in looking at B and C, as Commissioner Hoppick described, I think with some healthy deletion right in the middle of that, you can start with kind of the beginning language of B and finish with C. My suggestion would be that B and C be amended to read, every January 1st, starting in 2026, an annual cost of living adjustment to the compensation for commissioners and the mayor shall occur in an amount equal to the cost of living adjustment for City of Salina employees adopted for the corresponding fiscal year. So basically takes the beginning of B, the end of C, and inserts that they are to be equal. But given the draft of the ordinance and given your discussion, I think motion second amendment, if that's what you wish to do, would be appropriate on whichever topics you wish to amend.
Now that using the city's cost of living would certainly simplify.
It would sync it up, simplify it, and it would avoid the scenario that you discussed.
Yes. So these amounts that are put out here, is the commission having comment or changes to that?
I think from our previous discussion, for what I remember, these are probably numbers that most of us could live with. I mean, we probably would each finesse one number or the other slightly, but whatever we have is going to have to be palatable for four of the five of us. So this, I mean, works for me.
Okay, well, that's a good starting point, and it's something that's been overdue. Any other comments?
Just more an observation. I think it's, the assertion that the status quo from 1999 is okay. Indefinitely or in perpetuity, a little intellectually dishonest. So, I mean, I think this conversation, as awkward as it may be, it makes sense to use quantifiables like inflation as a factor in this number, and the fact that we have some kind of mechanism that the future commissions don't have to have this conversation again, in theory. It makes sense to me.
And it will ease the burden of someone who may be sitting up here for whom, taking off the equivalent of, if we have short meetings, a full workday a month could have on their personal income. I know it's, personally probably costs me more money to sit here than I will ever get from and it's a nice token. I'm not belittling it. And I imagine there have been a lot of other people sitting up here who've also lost money sitting up here. Much like people go to the U.S., well, it used to be, you go to the U.S. Senate or presidency, you work for a whole lot less than you did before you were elected. But it also is not an egregious amount that where the salary itself becomes the only reason for running for a position. I think this is still more of a public service, community service position. And we're not, if this was indeed one salary, it's not going to get them very far as a living wage.
Well, it will at least bring us up on par with some of our peer cities.
And
They'd
there's,
have a long way to go to catch up with what we have here.
This could have the potential to bring in more candidates that are willing to run too, knowing that, you know, a whole nother segment of people that this could help supplement if they were to have to take vacation or a cut in pay to be here. So, and I definitely agree. I like the mechanism that hopefully will save this conversation from having to happen again in 20 years from now.
well, and there's never a perfect time to discuss this, because no matter when you do it, you're always going to have at least two commissioners that are going to stay on. You know, if you vote it next year for the year following, you still have two people that are going to be sitting up here that'll still be staying on. As I've said from day one, I ran for the fact that it's community service, and if it stayed at $300, it wouldn't bother me. I know we have other commissioners here that are wishing to see that, this amount increased. Perhaps following what Commissioner Ivy said is maybe this does allow some people to run that wouldn't have. Again, I agree with Commissioner Davis. I don't want it to be such a large amount that people are running for the wrong reason. So I can live with this, I guess.
Any other comment? Any public comment? I'll bring this back for action.
So, Mayor and Commissioners, just kind of a logical progression of things. I think the preference would be that you pass the charter ordinance first, then you address the amendment of the ordinance, and then adopt the ordinance, if that's your intention.
So the amendments that we made would be in the second half of that.
Right.
Okay. So Mayor, move to approve Charter Ordinance number 44.
Second.
Have a motion and a second to approve Charter Ordinance number 44. And does this require a roll call?
Yes, please.
May we have the roll call?
Commissioner Davis?
Aye.
Commissioner Hoppick?
Aye.
Commissioner Ivy?
Aye.
Commissioner Lankowitz?
Aye.
Mayor Longbine?
Aye. Motion, ordinance carries 5-0.
And Mr. Mayor, move to approve ordinance number 24-11219.
Commissioner, I believe you want to officially amend it first.
Yeah, if you could,
I was going to do it all. Okay, can't do it all at once.
I think the preference would be
Okay.
go ahead and make the motion to amend and amend it, and then adopt it as amended. Just for the
People
record.
wonder why we have you guys sitting here. That's the reason. Okay, thank you. I move to amend, oh, sorry, because it is an ordinance. Ordinance number 24-11219, such that section 2-30 after section A would read, every January 1st, starting in 2026, an annual cost of living adjustment to the compensation for commissioners and the mayor shall occur in an amount equal to the cost of living adjustment for City of Salina employees that has been adopted for the current fiscal year.
Second.
Have a motion and a second to amend ordinance number 24-11219. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Or we need a roll call on that.
I don't think you do on the amendment, just the ordinance as amended.
So everyone else looking up over there, that's the reason I turned.
It looked like somebody was going to
Okay.
make a comment in the midst of all that, and maybe I was,
Okay.
so.
Did we get, we didn't get a second on that, did we?
Yeah, we did
Yes.
motion second, and then you asked. I said aye. I didn't know if anybody else did, I guess.
No, I heard aye from
We had a
Commissioner
motion and a
Hoppick.
second?
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah.
Okay. All in favor, say aye.
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 Motion carries 5-0.
Now, I think it'd be in order for me to Move to approve ordinance 24-11219 as amended.
Second.
Have a motion and a second to approve ordinance number 24-11219 as amended. May we have a roll call?
Commissioner Davis?
Aye.
Commissioner Hoppick?
Aye.
Commissioner Ivy?
Aye.
Commissioner Lankowitz?
Aye.
Mayor Longby?
Aye. Ordinance carries 5-0. Thank you. That will bring us to item 5.2.
Item 5.2, approve resolution number 24-8223, amending the 2024 staffing table, position classification and salary schedule, and adopting the 2025 staffing table, position classification and salary schedule.
Ms. Fisher.
Good evening, Mayor and Commissioners. I provided a substantial amount of information for you to review concerning our staffing tables and our pay plan or position classification schedule, and I'll try to take it in hopefully chronological order what I am proposing for change. So what we are requesting to amend for 2024 as of right now are a few positions. This would amend both the 2024 staffing table as well as change some pay grades for those existing positions. If those are acceptable changes, then those were also carried forward into the 2025 position classification listing as well as the staffing table. So one is reflected in the other. The handful of positions for 2024, it's the reason for those changes. It's a hybrid of a couple of reclassifications as well as the ability for us to take a different approach, particularly in our engineering area where we're having a hard time attracting engineers. Jumping forward to 2025, what the minimums and the maximums reflected for all of those pay grades. That is in accordance with what was discussed during the budget process and what was factored into the budget process. When we have a 4% cost of living adjustment, what happens, as you might recall, is it moves that minimum and the maximum 4%. So the entire pay grades, all of those pay grades increase by that much. Then the positions where we're requesting the pay grades change. So, for example, if we currently have that role in 107, there might be some that we are requesting to go to 109. Those are also factored in, redlined and colored, but at the very back of the packet, amongst all of your other attachments, was a summary of those changes as well as the impacts of pay grades were this, and if approved, they'll become this. I'll just make a couple of comments in terms of the bulk of those significant changes, if you will, have to do with our continued struggles in utilities. We've held, I looked at how many positions, we've averaged 17 vacancies, which in that size of a department, we've been running close to 40% vacant throughout this year. We've gained a few, and then we turn around and we lose them, so our retention is not great. And the overall tenure, we're not retaining the employees there. Over half of our employees now have less than 1 year of service there, so we need to do better. And I don't know that this will solve it, but it will at least, I guess, we'll make a good faith effort to try to maybe both attract and retain some individuals. It's difficult work. The hours aren't convenient. There's a lot of call-outs, a lot of overtime. So those are some of the impacts of just carrying out those roles. And then some of the roles in addition that are related for internal equity purposes are being requested to change as well. The dollar amount that was presented for the implementation, should those be acceptable and be approved, we're anticipating about $158,000 impact, but again, that's conservative because I don't know if we'll be able to fill all those positions. And in terms of implementation, the only time that we're adjusting wages would be if we have anyone in those roles where there's others in those roles, and to place them into the new pay grade. We didn't just automatically in an implementation plan plug in a percentage amount. We tried to take a more conservative approach to I guess balance both compression and internal equity, if that makes sense. When I speak of compression, it's if we have others in the position, and by starting to move the wages, we're treating those with little to no experience the same as those that have been with us for a few years or longer. I will jump back and say for the reclassification request, reclassification alone doesn't mean that we are going to be increasing anyone's pay. It means that we are placing that role into a higher pay grade, and unless they are making less than minimum, most of the time it just means that their earning potential is now increased. They went from this pay grade where the top end was X, they're moved to a higher pay grade. It might mean that the top end is now 5% or 10% higher, depending upon that. So all of those roles or the, I guess I should say, approaches are a little bit different, but just in terms of reclassification that I mentioned for current year, that doesn't mean automatically increasing the pay rates, and that's why you don't see a flat dollar amount. In terms of the changes to utilities, there would be some changes in pay required because of the number of individuals and the amount of change that we're looking at. That's really it in a nutshell. I can answer any questions or go back over any of the information that I have really briefly covered.
I think we have to trust you and the department heads to know what you need to do to fill those spots. And I think you said this, I just want to reiterate it for the public, that these dollars have already kind of been built into the 2025 budget. So we're not adjusting our budget at all.
Correct.
Okay.
One thing I didn't say is, unfortunately, I think yet this year we will likely be bringing back some other changes to you. Just based on targeting positions where we're really struggling, not necessarily across the board citywide, but little divisions or sects within those divisions where we're really struggling that we may need to do something different, but that might be coming back to you just so you have a heads up yet in a few weeks or a couple of meetings from now. But these, we think we owe it to the departments to give it a try, and I don't know if it will be the solution. We have done other things earlier this year. You might recall you approved additional vacation time. We added some standby pay. We implemented a overtime rate for all of our callbacks. So I think those are definitely helping, but we think we need to give this a try as well.
Who is with the utilities department, the primary employment competition? Have we done a wage study at all to a comparable job?
It's difficult. I can tell you, just thinking back, some of our individuals that we have hired and yet lost over the past few months, some of them are internal departments to where they have fewer call-outs. Some individuals have left to sell cars and said, I can make about the same without having to work the overtime. And some have went to the private sector and didn't really tell us where they're going. So I don't know that we have just one competitor, and we do continue to run into the issue of not necessarily getting apples to apples comparison. I don't know that maybe some of our utilities department employees might have more insight on who they think they're competing with, or if Martha has anything to add to that. But it's not just one area. We're losing them to multiple.
Yeah, and
it's difficult work.
My sense is it's a recruitment challenge as much or more so than a retention challenge. It's trying to convince people to take the position to begin with. I don't know that we're in direct competition with another employer as much as trying to recruit people to do these particular jobs. And then as Ms. Fisher said, we see them transfer to other departments within the city. When you asked who our biggest competition was, the reason I chuckled is I thought it's kind of ourselves. They moved to other departments within our own organization.
But I think it kind of covers a broad range from water plant operators to the crews going out doing water main service. And is that correct when you describe utilities?
Yep, it's the guys and gals that you see out working on the street, down in the hole, fixing water mains, and it's those making sure our water and wastewater is treated accordingly, and some other support positions to help them as well.
Okay, so we're not talking about street department. It's mainly water and sewer.
Correct, these utilities.
So is this going to be kind of the order of business for a while now in terms of assessing these different gaps in staffing? And do we see a light at the end of the tunnel, or is it just going to be the way it is for a while?
I wish I could say once a year we'll take care of it through budget or maybe an amendment. City manager and I have recently talked about something that we think is going to have to occur more often. I don't know what that magic interval is, but it might be quarterly, it might be semi-annually, or it might be as small emergencies crop up to where we're bringing some of these problems before you.
Well, for what it's worth, to me, it's proactive. I mean, I'd rather see this happen than we just kind of sit idly by as employees leave in droves, and then we make adjustments, you know, like a year later, and then we're really playing catch up. And I know, like, for instance, it seems like after we did some pay increases, it seems like other cities and other governing entities bumped everything up as well, and then we were ahead of the game, and then we kind of even, so to speak, or maybe even a little behind some other competitors. And this just makes sense to me. And I know it's got to be a lot of extra work, and I appreciate it, but I think it's really worthwhile.
I will add, too, that our departments are becoming creative on saying what can we do differently in terms of at least filling some of the demand with maybe a lesser qualified individual at that time. For example, CDLs are harder to get now, so adding a labor role in a couple of our areas to where we can hire them without it and then maybe bump them to another pay grade after they obtain it. We've had that in more than one division currently occurring, and it's there. I think we're just going to continue to try to come up with ways. Engineering currently within Public Works, that's the same approach. You might have noticed, and I didn't speak to it because we aren't really adding additional people, but we are adding additional lower pay grades. So if we can find at least part of the skill set that we're after, maybe it will give them the opportunity to hire someone into one of those other roles until they get the experience and other qualifications. But it's, I guess, just trying different approaches to help us compete with who we think would be good employees.
And I don't know what our competition's doing, but I know sometimes money is a factor and sometimes it isn't. Has there been any thought to some positions, you can't do it to all or to rotate it, but to go to a 4-day work week for some individuals? I mean, some people would rather have an extra day, have a 3-day weekend, or have 3 days off a week than a pay raise, and that's just, you can't, and perhaps that's something we need to look at.
Yep, I do think it has some merit. We have it maybe in a few areas, but not very widely adopted.
Yeah.
We built some capacity for flex scheduling, and it really becomes a function of the operation and whether the divisions can find a way to make that work.
Well, I think what we're dealing with, is nothing new. Business and industry everywhere is dealing with the same problem, and I would assume other municipalities are struggling just like we are. Is that correct?
Yes. And probably not just municipalities, but the that's a common discussion thread between other HR and department managers of the areas where they continue to struggle to get employees and what we're doing and exchanging ideas.
Are we losing as many new recruits as we are veterans?
In some of our areas, our retention's pretty low. I don't have all of the figures. I've been looking at, there for a short while in a couple of the areas where we're keeping an eye on. We're losing them anywhere from 3 to 8 months. So it's pretty disturbing, but that's not across the board.
Yeah, and part of that is, and this may not be politically correct, but I think it's a generational deal a little bit. There's not the same amount of loyalty to employers as there used to be.
Well, there's a lot of opportunities out there now. I think I've shared with quite a few of you. We, as an organization, we were had a long time between pay plans until we did the one that we just did. Now we're kind of in pay plan maintenance until it comes time to do another one. The result of that pay plan was identification of not just our peer public entities, but private sector employers and how we compared. But I think I shared with you, that as we're doing that, I can drive the community and see particular employers that are advertising a position and a pay rate. And a couple weeks later, they've raised that pay rate, and it looks like they've just raised the pay rate till they're able to fill the position. That has not been the city way of doing things. We do a pay plan once every 10 years and then just hang on.
And again, I go back to the generational deal. People, look at the dollars they're being paid. They don't take in the full compensation package. I think we have excellent health care we offer. Being a part of Caper, you get good retirement. Some people nowadays are just looking at that, like you said, right. They'll just up their pay, and you may not be getting the same benefits, but not always do they weigh those as they should. So,
and I think that's the reason some private employers will tie the lucrative financial, I'm gonna call it a bonus, but that benefit to having to remain there for a certain period of time, and you hope within a 2 or 3 year period they've developed some level of comfort or loyalty where it's a little more work to leave than it is to just jump to the next. But it's probably no different from, okay, I'll get this credit card with no interest, and when that 18 months is up, I'll get the next credit card with no interest. So a lot of times younger ones, they plan, I'll do this for 2 years, that for 2 years, this for 2 years. So there's got to be some incentive to keep them there. And after, particularly as we get older, money alone is not a good reason to get out of bed at 2 in the morning when it's 10 below and a pipe is burst. It's quality of life and working conditions. I don't know how you make that particular scenario a nicer working condition. I guess bring a lot of food and hot tea to them or something. But it's a tough job.
When I was at a conference this summer, there was a municipality that presented on, it's not the same as it used to be, on how long individuals are going to work for an organization, and they had revamped their entire organizational retirement system to be able to give their employees, upon hire, the ability to opt out of their state retirement system in exchange for a lower system that would pay them better within 3 years, because if they could retain them for 3 years, then it was better for the employee and cheaper for them on paying in, because their data was showing they weren't going to have this generation that was joining them for more than 3 years. And that was, for me, a little disturbing, because we are hoping to attract and retain our employees that will hopefully want to retire here. But just, it's a different approach, different workforce that we're competing for.
So retirement benefits are not a factor, huh?
Not for them anyway. Yeah. Sometimes we find that as well, but.
Well, I think we doing a pretty good job with getting the word out locally? Are we reaching out regionally and across state lines to try to recruit?
I can provide a summary at some point in the near future when I need to do a commission information memorandum, if that would be the time to work with our my recruitment coordinator, that used to be our administrative assistant, is reaching to a lot of different recruitment sources. Multi-state, multi-region, it does depend on the role, but she's covering a lot of ground in terms of both, and then a lot of both virtual and in-person job fairs locally, schools, university boards, just those that cater to municipal jobs. There's a lot of recruitment going on. It's just a matter. And we are looking at ways that we can speed up our process as well, because we aren't in a position where we can hire someone and same day have them start work for us because of the amount of diligence that we do, but we are looking for ways to at least try to turn that a little quicker so we don't lose candidates.
I know the police department, they had done a lot of recruitment efforts. Are they continuing that?
Yes, they are currently looking to, I believe they're updating some videos, and they are revamping some website that was used to be current but isn't. There's some efforts there, and then they are continuing to do a lot of recruitment fairs as well. I can't tell you exactly where they're going and when, but I know they have a lot of activity.
So what is our officer number now? I've seen recently we hired a couple new officers.
I don't know the exact number of officers right now, but I do know we're still, for the police department, about 19 down. The majority of those positions are in the officer area.
So is it safe to surmise that that's one of the areas that we're still looking at?
Yes.
And kind of back to your recruitment and advertising and getting the word out. I mean, it seems like if we needed to, we could find more money in the budget, and it seems like it'd be money well spent to kind of send it that direction. And, you know, maybe if we had to outsource some of, I mean, and I think the people that are here do a great job, but, you know, maybe it might be time to bump up what we spend and do like I mean, I don't know, maybe a more of a higher grade or professional grade type of maybe an advertisement on television, or maybe that's an old way to think in retrospect, but there has to be some kind of like maybe a higher production value promo of some kind, but I'm just spitballing at this point. And I'm sure you guys have already looked at all that, but.
Well, you know, the correctional facility in Hutch, I knew for a while, was doing a fair amount of higher level TV advertisement. Almost made it look like as exciting as going to Disneyland is, but until you realize they're actually advertising a prison here, but it's an idea.
Yeah, worth kicking around.
Well,
I'm sorry,
I don't think we're
Ellsworth.
alone, because I hear the concerns coming from business and industry that I know it costs a lot to onboard an employee, and we invest, and then they don't stay. So I think focusing on what it's going to take to get retention would be a good area to, rather than just throw money. What's it going to take to make people happy and content and become a 30-year employee?
Money helps anyway. Say money helps.
Any other comments, questions? We'll open this up for public comment.
Ben Winholt, Salina. Commissioner Hoppick hit the nail on the head. I've seen this going on, being in the blue-collar trades for 45 years. The last 15, 20 years, we've had a problem with trying to get people to come into the blue-collar trades. When you're talking utilities with the city, especially with the water department, that's probably one of the less glamorous jobs that you could have because of the demand and being outside and the temperatures and what you're dealing with. The last employer that I was at, which is the largest employer in Salina County, we saw the same thing, especially in maintenance. It's the last two generations that have decided that they want more pay, but they don't want to work for it. They don't want to work, period. I mean, we saw this in maintenance. The hires, they would retain them because of the fact they found out they didn't have to do anything and be able to keep their job. So that's the way it's become. So there is no magic formula to keeping retention of any employee, especially a new employee these days. It's sad to say, but it's because of the way the last two generations, I think, were raised at home, given everything, not having to work for it. They expect everything given to them now, and not have to produce anything to do it. A lot of the employees that I see would go from paycheck to paycheck, not looking to the future, not looking to retirement, not looking to any of the benefits. It was what they could get out of that paycheck that week, and then not show up for work because they didn't need the money right now. So there is no magic formula to what you're going to try to do, because every organization, and I'm sure this is across the United States, is dealing with this with the generation until the attitudes of staying with an employer and making something for yourself, moving up in the world changes to benefit the younger generation. They're not going to work. I hate to say it, but that's just the way it is. It's been like that. Like I said, it's been like that for the last 15 years. I've seen it in the plumbing trade. I've seen it in electrical. I've seen it in all the trades that are blue collar. And it's not the money issue. It's the fact that they don't want to get their hands dirty, period. Thank you.
Norman Mammal, Salina. Mr. Linkowitz, did you read that article I told you about March 24 in the Atlantic Journal?
Yeah, I did.
Okay, now you know where it is. Degree of danger and position determines the pay scale. It's one of your most dangerous jobs, number 5, here you look up in ZipRecruiter, refuse recyclable collectors, landscaping, electrical power installers. But it is about money. Show me the money. I can go out of this state and make all kinds of money. But you're hampered by budget. So you're looking at competing with private industry. Nobody is forced in a position. You can walk away from this job. In the military, we couldn't. So dangerous jobs are here present. But show me the money, because I can go make $75 an hour renting a crane. You can't compete with that. And the retirement benefits, your health benefits are no good. If you start paying these people 100% of their health benefits, then you'll get something. Because the job I was on, they paid 100%. So you're competing against private enterprise, so you're going to have hard trouble getting people to come here, but we'll go on the road. And it is about money.
Another comment. Bring this back for action.
Before I walk out of here and I get beat up by the last generation or two, it's not all of the last two generations, but it's a higher percentage than it used to be. So just in case my son's watching, I just don't want him to meet me at the office.
I agree. It was making us feel like our generation's failed as parents, but
but it is a higher percentage, and it's not everyone. So with that being said, Mayor Longbine, I move we approve resolution number 24-8233, adopting the staffing table, position classification, and salary schedule for 2025, and amending the staffing table, position classification, and salary schedule for 2024.
Second.
A motion is second to approve resolution number 24-8233, adopting the staffing table, position classification, and salary schedule for 2025, and amending the staffing table, position classification, and salary schedule for 2024. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. And we have no developmental business. Is there anything other business commissioner would like to bring up? That would bring us to citizens forum. If you have a comment on something not on today's agenda, please state your name.
Rosemary Mice, Salina, Kansas. I just want to let the public and commissioners and mayor know that the Granny Brigade is hosting a candidate forum for the general election next week, Tuesday, the 17th at 7 p.m. at the Carver Center at 315 North 2nd, and the public is invited, and it will be live streamed by Mean Dean Productions.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ben Winholt, Salina. Now I'm going to eat crow. 2 weeks ago, I commented on my water bill had doubled from June to July, and kind of spun it as if it was glitches in the new system, new water system, that could possibly be the reason why it did. After being brought to my attention by the city manager that I had basically underestimated my water usage in June with watering the lawn versus July, and that was brought to my attention, and that was one of the reasons why my bill had actually doubled. And so with that, I apologize for underestimating. Today, I did, by the city manager's recommendation, go and visit the water department on a related issue as far as this billing. And I come to find out I'm a victim of circumstance. The wastewater charges basically are supposed to be, if you, during the winter months, there's an average, and then they take that average of the water usage and put that to the wastewater usage, and this is what you get charged for every month. But in my case, I moved into a new residence in December, and with that there was no case or no history of the winter months for my new account. And so it automatically, wastewater goes up to the getting charged as 7,180 gallons before it goes into the excess part of it, if you don't have a history. And with that, then your wastewater now becomes more than your water bill, which was the case on 3 of my months. Basically, Katie in the water department, or in the billing department, she needs a raise. I'm going to tell you that right now. Very sweet woman. Basically explained to me what this was all about, how this was, and actually did a adjustment so that I am taken care of, basically for this. So again, I apologize for what I said 2 weeks ago, but not all of it, of my high water bill, was due to the water charges. A lot of it was the fact that I was getting charged wastewater because of no history. So I think everything's taken care of now, and going forward, we'll see where my water bill goes from here. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Winholtz, for clarifying that. And
you all knew that too, because he said he sent you.
Yes, but I appreciate your apology.
Yeah.
And if I could underscore just a little bit, the water customer accounting does have a high level of detail. So they are a good point of contact. They can give you quite a bit of information about your usage and try to help you get to the bottom of things like that.
Norman Mount, Salina. What are your plans, if any, to reduce the water usage? Who do you shut off first? I just come back from out west. We're out of water. My ponds are dry. You ain't going to get any water. We're going to shut you off. Priority, seniority. Cheney Lake is 6 foot low. And yet you're letting people use water here that isn't necessary. About don't want to work. Why should I work? I can go be a professional student. My loan gets paid off. They can go to school forever. They're doing it. That's why they're not working. I've talked to people. They're going to school. So I go to mom and dad. Well, I'm going to take that money that we didn't have to pay for, and I'm going to go have fun.
Anyone else? I did want to make a comment. Commissioner Davis has brought this up about the water billing, getting the envelope to submit your payment and the waste and that. Well, I did sign up for the e-statement, and so now last week I got an email, and the statement was there in a PDF for me to print if I wanted, but I didn't get anything in the mail. So
I will
you
switch.
get on that account, you can go in there and check that box to do an e-statement. Many utilities and companies are pushing that. Credit card companies are even, they charge you $2 if you get a mailed statement. So I think that'd be a huge cost savings to the city if we could get that word out and get people to sign up to eliminate that mailing.
Good idea.
Well, I think we're going to have a record short meeting for this year.
That Mayor Longbine, I move we adjourn.
Second.
Motion is second to adjourn. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye.